All right, let's talk about Jean Piaget. He was a psychologist who completely blew up our old ideas about how the human mind works. His big, and I mean radical idea, that our ability to think is actually built from the ground up by our own bodies.
So, let's kick things off with a simple question. Is thinking something that just happens between your ears, totally cut off from the physical world? For the longest time, that was pretty much the standard view. But Piaget came along and challenged that whole idea, saying, hold on, our minds aren't just passengers in our bodies, they are made of and grow from our bodies.
Okay, let's get right into it, because this is Piaget's core claim. He said that we don't just passively soak up knowledge from the world like a sponge. Nope, we are active builders. We literally construct our own understanding through real physical interaction.
And what's so fascinating is the order he puts things in. For Piaget, action always comes first. Before a kid has words, they have their hands, their eyes, their mouth. They touch things, grab things, shake things. And that isn't just them being cute or playing around, that is the very beginning of thinking. That's how an infant starts to figure out how reality even works. Now, to really get this, you have to realize Piaget wasn't your typical psychologist. He was actually a biologist first. He was obsessed with how living things adapt to their world. So he looked at the mind not as some kind of mysterious ghost in a machine, but as a biological system, one that grows and adapts just like any other part of an organism. So before Piaget, everyone pretty much thought that kids were just, tiny, dumber adults. Their thinking was seen as just a less powerful version of ours. Piaget just turned that idea on its head. He showed that children are more like little scientists. Their minds aren't just weaker, they are fundamentally, qualitatively different. They think in completely different ways because they're busy running experiments on everything they can get their hands on. He even gave his field a pretty wild name, genetic epistemology. Now, don't get hung up on the word genetic. It has nothing to do with genes or DNA. It's about Genesis, the origin story. He was literally studying the birth and growth of knowledge itself, treating it like a biological process. So if we're all out here building our own reality, how does that actually work? Well, Piaget laid out a really clear, dynamic process for how our minds learn and grow, and it all boils down to one key idea. And that idea is something called a schema. The easiest way to think about a schema is like a mental file folder or an index card. It's a little package of information we use to make sense of the world. We're born with a few super basic ones, like how to suck or how to grab, and we build out our entire mental world from there. And this visual sums up the whole system perfectly. You've got the schemas, those are your building blocks. Then you have adaptation, which is the process of updating those building blocks based on new experiences, and that whole process is what moves us through the major stages of development. It's this constant, beautiful cycle of learning and growing. Note, this process of adaptation is like a four-step dance. We start off in a nice, comfy state of balance, or what he called equilibrium. Then, bam, a new experience comes along that just doesn't fit our mental map. That throws us into disequilibrium. Our first instinct is to try assimilation. Basically, we try to cram that new information into a file folder we already have. But if it really doesn't fit, we have no choice but to do accommodation, where we have to change a folder or make a brand new one. And just like that, we're back in balance, only now our understanding is a little bit sharper. Here is a classic example. Imagine a toddler has a schema for cow. It's a big, four-legged animal on a farm. Then one day they see a horse and yell, "Cow!" That's assimilation. They're using the file folder they've got. But when someone says, "No, sweetie, that's a horse," their brain has to accommodate. They have to create a new horse folder that's separate from the cow folder. And just like that, their view of the world just got a little more complex, a little more accurate. All right, so this connection between doing stuff and thinking about stuff is never more clear, never more raw than in Piaget's very first stage of development. He called it the sensory-motor stage, and this is really where the magic begins. Think about it. From the day they're born until they're about 2, a baby's intelligence is its actions. There's no separation. When a baby grabs a toy, shakes it, puts it in its mouth, they are not just passing the time. For Piaget, they are literally thinking. They are forming their first concepts about texture, about sound, about cause and effect, all through physical exploration. And you can just see this incredible explosion of ability unfold. An infant starts with just basic reflexes. Then they start repeating actions on their own body on purpose, like wiggling their fingers. Then they start acting on the world to see what happens, like shaking a rattle just to hear the sound. It all builds step by step, from simple actions to complex, goal-oriented behavior. It's a rapid-fire construction of a mind, built entirely on physical action.
So what's the big payoff from all this grabbing and shaking? Well, some of the most fundamental ideas we have about reality get built right here. Concepts like object permanence, the idea that a toy still exists even after you cover it with a blanket, that's not something we're born with. A baby has to learn it by physically interacting with the world. Same goes for cause and effect, and even the basic sense that they are a self that's separate from everything else. It's all built by the body.
Okay, so let's zoom out and pull this all together. Piaget's work was never just about how babies think. It was this massive statement about what human knowledge even is, connecting our most complex, abstract thoughts all the way back to our basic biology.
He saw a direct line. Just like an animal's body evolves to be better suited to its environment, our mental structures, our schemas, evolved to give us a better, more accurate map of the world. Thinking, for him, was just a super specialized form of biological adaptation. And when you think that way, it has huge implications for things like education, right? If knowledge is something we build, not something we're just given, then the point is school can't be to just pour facts into students' heads. As Piaget puts it right here, the goal should be to create people who can think for themselves, who can build new things.
You know, in the end, Piaget's biggest contribution might be how he just dissolved that old, dusty line between the mind and the body. He was talking about embodied cognition decades before it was a cool buzzword. He showed us that our incredible minds aren't just rattling around inside our bodies, they are built by them. Our most abstract reasoning has its roots right there in the simple physical actions of a baby.
And that just leaves us with a really fascinating and maybe slightly unnerving question for our own time. If Piaget was right, if our minds are shaped by physical interaction with the world, then what happens as our lives become less physical and more virtual? How is that fundamentally changing the way we think? It's definitely something to chew on. Thanks for joining me.